Alright folks, how you doing? So in this video I'll show you what happens when two narcissists end up colliding. Here you've got Piers Morgan, who's an upper mid-range narcissist, and he's going to be debating against Alex Jones, who in my opinion is an upper lesser type B.
Anyone who's watched this show over the past few weeks knows I've taken a pretty strong stand on guns in America. It's not escaped the notice of supporters of gun rights, and it's led to a petition on the White House official website, no less. It's entitled, and I quote, "Deport British citizen Piers Morgan for attacking Second Amendment."
Which obviously wounds his immense pride. I mean, being an upper mid-range narcissist, he's a very arrogant and haughty and very proud person. You know, he doesn't like that, there's a petition to kick him out, so he has to assert control over it.
Take a look. More than 104,000 people have signed it so far. And joining me now is one of the people behind the petition, Alex Jones.
And the whole reason he's got Alex Jones on the show is to try and assert control over him and out-argue him and make him look bad, which to an extent he actually did. But that has more to do with the type of narcissist that Alex Jones is than anything that Piers Morgan did. You know, I mean, he basically just sat back and let him ramble, as you'll see in a minute.
Host of the Alex Jones Show. Welcome to you.
Piers, thanks for having me.
Why do you want to deport me?
See, an upper mid-range narcissist would always be like, what, you don't think my opinion's valid? You must be crazy, there must be something wrong with you. Well, that really applies to any narcissist pretty much, but, you know, upper mid-range, they have to assert, dominance through passive-aggressive behaviours and intellect, and quite often, certainly more often than not, mid-range narcissists are far more intelligent than lesser narcissists. Or at least they certainly like to portray themselves that way.
Well, we did it as a way to bring attention to the fact that we have all of these foreigners and the Russian government, the official Chinese government. Mao said political power goes out of the barrel of a gun. He killed about 80 million people because he's the only guy that had the guns. So we did it to point out that this is globalism, and the mega banks that control the planet and brag that they've taken over, in Bloomberg, AP, Reuters, you name it, brag that they're going to get our guns as well. They've taken everybody's guns but the Swiss and the American people. And when they get our guns, they can have their world tyranny while the government buys 1.6 billion bullets, armored vehicles, tanks, helicopters, Predator drones, armed, now in U.S. skies, being used to arrest people in North Dakota. The Second Amendment isn't there for duck hunting. It's there to protect us from tyrannical government and street thugs. Take the women in India. Your piece earlier on CNN I was watching during Anderson Cooper's show didn't tell you that the women of India have signed giant petitions to get firearms.
Notice that Alex hasn't really answered the question as such. This is a sign that you're talking to a narcissist when they kind of go off on a tangent and then off on another tangent, especially a lesser, because they live in their own head. They live in their own little delusional world. That's not to say that everything that Alex Jones is saying here is false, by the way, or not factual. But, the key to defeating a lesser narcissist is to just let them talk, But you have to understand, the chaotic nature of the lesser narcissist mind. It really is kind of all over the place.
Because the police can't and won't protect them. The answer is, wait a minute, I have FBI crime statistics that come out a year late, 2011.
The thing about lesser narcissists, they're articulate only really in short bursts. They have to be kind of moderated.
20+% crime drop in the last 9 years.
If you look at Piers, he does kind of look down his nose at Alex, not just figuratively, but quite literally. Because, being an upper mid-range narcissist, he considers himself the intellectual superior of Alex Jones. And to be fair, he probably is.
Real violent crime, because more guns means less crime. Britain took the guns 15, 16 years ago.
See, Alex has gone in, operating from his limbic system and his reptilian brain, which lesser narcissists, tend to do. The lesser, narcissist operates from the R complex and the limbic system quite a lot of the time. So Alex has gone in expecting an attack, and he's already halfway towards fight, freeze, or flight. And Piers has hardly said 5 words to him. But this is also how you know that you're dealing with a lesser narcissist, because they operate from a far more instinctual level than the mid-range narcissist.
Tripling of...
They operate from a lot more of the neo-mammalian mind, and also the limbic system as well. But You know, narcissism literally affects your brain chemistry and how you think. That's something else to remember.
Your overall violent crime. True, we have a higher gun violence level, but overall mugging, stabbings, deaths, those men raped that woman in India to death with an iron rod 4 feet long.
Notice also with Alex, there's no facade. There is absolutely no facade. With lessers, what you see is what you get. And upper lesser type Bs are bulls in a china shop. You know, Piers has done basically very little, if not nothing, to, you know, coax this level of nervous energy out of Alex.
You can't ban the iron rods, the guns, the iron rods.
Very animated, very assertive, bordering on aggressive. Yeah, definitely a lesser narcissist. In my opinion, an upper lesser type B.
Piers didn't do it. The tyrants.
That's not to say that he's not got a point, by the way. I'm not saying that. I'm analysing the behaviour, not the argument.
Did it. Hitler took the guns. Stalin took the guns. Mao took the guns. Fidel Castro took the guns. Hugo Chavez took the guns. And I'm here to tell you, 1776 will commence again if you try to take our firearms.
Ignited fury, which Piers did pretty much absolutely nothing to spark. He's mostly just sat there. But there you go. I mean, that's the nature of the upper lesser type B.
Doesn't matter how many lemmings you get out there on the street begging for them to have their guns taken. We will not relinquish them. Do you understand?
Has Piers said anything about relinquishing firearms? Not that I can remember. You know, he wanted to bring him on to debate Alex about the subject, but I don't recall Piers ever threatening to do that.
And that's why you're going to fail, and the establishment knows no matter how much propaganda, the Republic will rise.
But like I said, when you're dealing with a lesser narcissist, they operate from a very core area of the brain, the R complex and the limbic system. There's not much going on in the neo-mammalian and the frontal cortex when you're dealing with a lesser narcissist.
Again, when you attempt to take our guns. My family in the Texas Revolution against Santa Anna, my family was at the core on both sides starting that. Because Santa Anna came to take the guns at Gonzales, Texas.
And again, being a lesser narcissist, Alex has made it all about himself. You only have to give a lesser narcissist about 30 seconds or a minute before they make any argument about themselves.
Piers, don't try what your ancestors did before.
That's why when you have Walter Sobchak, for example, he goes about 20 seconds before he starts talking about Vietnam. It doesn't matter what the subject is.
Why don't you come to America? I'll take you out shooting. You can become an American and join the Republic.
And Piers this whole time, because he's a mid-range narcissist, upper mid-range, has sat very, very still and allowed him, in his opinion and in his mind, you know, he has allowed Alex to make a fool of himself. Has he done that? Depends who you ask, I suppose, but in my opinion, kind of.
You finished?
Yes, I am finished. You will not take my right. You go through.
Look at this look. He looks at him like, really? He's looking at Alex like he's an idiot, because in his opinion, because he's a mid-range narcissist, he thinks pretty much everyone who isn't him is an idiot. But that's on the subconscious level. He doesn't consciously think that. That's subconsciously. But you can see it in his face.
Background checks to get guns. How about Prozac? You know the number one. Oh, that's the big sponsor, isn't it?
Again, Alex operating out of the R complex and the limbic system, which is fight, freeze, or flight, operating on an instinctive level, is attacking Piers based on nothing. Piers has said nothing about Prozac. But in Alex's mind, you know, the lesser narcissist mind is very, very nervous. Very, very nervous. Very aware of threats to control which don't even necessarily exist. I guess the word would be paranoia, to a certain extent. Yeah, but remember, this is an upper lesser narcissist. So intellectually, that does kind of creep in a little bit. It's not purely, you know, slug him in the face. That would be a lower lesser, or sulk, which would be a mid lesser. You see, no sulking from Alex Jones. The upper lesser B is very bombastic. So he's talking about Prozac, even though he's the one who brought it up. Piers never brought that up yet. Or I don't think ever does bring it up. But he's saying, oh yeah, that's the big sponsor, you know. So Alex does himself no favours. When you're dealing with upper lesser type Bs, they reveal what they're thinking far too often. You know, they allow their paranoia and their apprehension and their nervousness to get the better of them a lot of the time, and they attack people based upon what they think the other person is thinking, but they might not be. They make a lot of assumptions about their opponents.
Or that whole class of drugs.
Let me ask you a question.
And now Piers is like, okay, should I step in now? And all he says is, let me ask you a question, because he's realizing that he's completely losing control over this whole thing. And yeah, it was okay for a while to let Alex ramble away and rant and all that sort of thing, but Piers, because he is a narcissist, a mid-range narcissist, he does have to reassert control over Alex Jones and over the debate in general. He can't really let it go too long.
Oh, gotta cut that off, don't you?
And again, the very nervous, R-complex, limbic, you know, this is where they think from, primarily, the upper lesser Bs, you know. Oh, no, you got to cut that off. He takes it as a big threat to his control.
Don't want to talk about the U.S. number one cause of death.
And again, upper lesser B, what does the B stand for? Belligerent, bullying, bombastic. I'm not saying that Alex is bullying Piers Morgan, not really, but, you know, that bombastic nature is never far from the surface.
Suicide now because they give...
And it didn't take a lot. It didn't take a lot for Alex to start shouting. Give him long enough, he'll start swearing too. You know.
People, suicide, mass murder pills.
Calm down.
And Alex makes himself look absolutely crazy. If you're watching this and this is the first time that you've ever seen Alex Jones and you never watched InfoWars or anything like that, this is the first time ever that you've seen Alex Jones, you think he's fucking crazy. No, he's just an upper type B lesser narcissist, you know.
Answers give more money to the psychiatrist.
Again, like finger pointing, you know, it comes close to something that I heard HG saying, that the upper lesser type B, they point their finger at your chest to try and control you. We've literally just seen that from Alex Jones. That almost went over my head.
They give people suicide, mass murder pills.
I'll slow it down, but look at this. Watch this. I'll reduce the playback speed to half. Watch this.
Calm down.
Your answers give more money.
See? Finger pointing. You're, finger in the chest. Like, this is very upper lesser type B behavior. Anyway, back to normal speed.
Money of the psychiatrist and psychologist to put more crazy people on drugs that make them kill people, Piers.
Let's try and have a debate here.
And, okay, upper mid-range, calm and collected, because they always wish to appear intellectual. In all fairness, they are. Upper mid-range narcissists are, intellectually driven much more so than lesser narcissists, and they like to appear reasonable and calm, even though they're very haughty and arrogant, but that's on the subconscious level. They want to appear superior to their opponents. That's driven by their narcissism.
Yeah.
Answer me this question.
I'm sick of the same old script here, bud.
And you'll notice a little bit passive-aggressive here from the upper mid-range narcissist, and I'll slow it down a little so you can see it.
It's fine, bud.
That's fine, bud. That's not straight-out aggressive, that's passive-aggressive. That's the difference between upper, mid-range, and lesser.
Answer me this question.
I'm sick of the same old script here, bud.
Very belligerent on Alex Jones's part. Sick of the same old script here, bud.
It's fine, bud.
That's fine, bud. They're both narcissists.
How many gun murders were there in America last year? Do you know?
There were about 11,000.
And notice that Alex does directly answer this, because one thing about lesser narcissists, they are very direct. They're not mealy-mouthed at all. They're not passive-aggressive. If you ask them a question, they will try to give you a straight answer, but they might fall short of that because they tend to get sidetracked, and because they live in their own delusional minds, they'll go off topic and ramble and circle everything right back around to talking about themselves pretty quickly. We've already seen that. But they will try to answer direct.
400
mid-range narcissists trying to get a straight answer out of them, on the other hand, good luck with that.
58, and about 74% of those were gang-related, gangbangers shooting each other. You get 3,500 to 4,000.
That wasn't the
How
question.
many people died from infection?
And then, once again, Alex changes the subject, because upper lesser type Bs, I think I talked about this before when I was talking about Walter and Donald Trump. Again, other examples of upper lesser type Bs, but upper lesser type Bs, I notice this particularly with them in debates, they will shift the argument to something where they feel comfortable in order to control the conversation. You will see this with Trump, you will see this with Walter talking about Vietnam all the time, and you're about to see this here with Alex Jones, because they're all the same type of narcissist, in my opinion.
Infections in hospitals, 197,000.
Let me just ask you a second.
That's right.
How many gun murders were there in Britain?
How many great...
And, you know, Piers trying to shift the conversation, shift the debate over to his side, because of course he's a narcissist, trying to control the conversation, but he doesn't realise he's dealing with a bull in a china shop. You cannot control lesser narcissists. It just will not happen, you know. And Alex here trying to also reassert control over the conversation by not answering.
White sharks.
No, how many
killed?
By answering a question with a question, which is a cheap tactic, which doesn't really work very well. It just makes you look like you don't know the answer. But again, you're dealing with a lesser narcissist. You're dealing with a very blunt instrument.
People every year, but they're scared to swim.
Right. How many?
And you notice Piers still trying to appear calm and rational and intellectual.
Gun murders were there in Britain?
And again, he reasserts the same question. How many gun murders were there in Britain last year?
A very low amount. I already went over those statistics.
Many, do you know?
It was only a few hundred.
No.
Again, straight answer out of Alex. He doesn't even know the answer, but he was just saying, I'm guessing it was a few hundred.
No. How many gun murders?
He says, no, answer it. Piers has to ask him 3 times before he can get him under control enough to, you know, make his point.
Actually, actually did pull up the statistics. Here, let me pull them out right here. I figured you'd do that.
I love that. I figured you would do that, you know. Try to control the narrative, try to control the conversation. Well, he is the host, Alex, you know. You are only the guest, but, you know, try telling the upper lesser type B and the B as in bull in a china shop that, you know, because upper lesser Bs are the king holding court like all narcissists are. It's just they do it in different ways. And he has his facts and his statistics, he thinks, to try and back him up.
Gun murders in Britain last year.
UK violent crime capital of Europe.
See, Alex doesn't directly answer, but he gives another answer to try and shift the narrative onto his ground.
London Telegraph. Here, let me give you more.
It's quite a simple question.
Well, that's the oldest.
You're a very loud man.
No.
Yeah. Piers saying you're a very loud man. And well, he is. He's not saying anything that's not true.
That's the oldest Perry Mason tactic to ask me some little...
You make a lot of noise. Yeah, you're dealing with an upper lesser type B. What do you expect? That's pretty much what they are.
Factoid.
It's not a little factoid.
I already said earlier,
we're talking about
England has a lot lower...
And, you know, mid-rangers, they operate with a facade, but if you go on long enough, you can break it down a little bit. And I think Piers's facade is beginning to crumble slightly.
Gun crime rate because you took all the guns.
Let me try exactly my point.
But you've got hordes of people burning down cities and beating old women's brains out every day.
What a ridiculous thing.
And here, Piers is saying, that's ridiculous. And what a ridiculous thing. It does sound ridiculous, the way that Alex is saying it, because he's incapable of being calm when he's in debate mode. You'll never get an upper lesser type B to stay calm in an argument. It's never going to happen. So it does sound ridiculous. That's for sure.
Arrest people in England.
Again with the finger pointing, you notice that?
If they defend themselves, that's on record. My God.
Look at the facial.
What a ridiculous
They arrest
statement.
people in England if they defend themselves.
Look at the wildness, you know. Look at the aggression. Look at, you know, the body language, the posture, the face.
It's on record. My God, you've got a total police state. Everybody's fleeing that country because you've had
Again, finger pointing.
to flee here, bud.
The finger in the chest to make the point. Yeah.
And I want to say this right here. You think you're a tough guy?
And even though he's an upper lesser narcissist, Alex is still a lesser narcissist, and violence and physical confrontation is kind of the thing when it comes to lesser narcissists. It's how one of the means by which they assert control. Now, he's not a lesser narcissist, otherwise he would have belted him already. He's not a middle lesser narcissist, otherwise he would have probably stormed off the stage by now. Based upon, you know, the recordings I've heard of HG where he talks about all this. But being an upper lesser, it still circles around the violence on some level. You know, it could be verbal violence, it could be emotional violence, it could be physical violence.
Have me back with a boxing ring in here.
Lesser narcissists are very primitive creatures. They really are.
And I'll wear red, white, and blue, and you can wear your Jolly Roger.
Okay.
I think you mean Union Jack, Alex. But anyway, being a middle well, not middle, sorry, mid-range, I should say. Even an upper mid-range narcissist is fundamentally cowardly by nature. Mid-range narcissists will only physically fight those that they believe that they can overpower. And there's no way that Piers Morgan could overpower Alex Jones, so he's never going to fight him. That would never happen.
You know what?
Let's try again. How many gun murders were there?
And again, Piers reiterating the same point that he's had to make, 4 or 5 times now? I've actually lost count.
Oh, you're going to ban your fist now?
In Britain last year.
How many chimpanzees can dance on the head of a pin?
And again, you see the barbarism and the primitive nature of the lesser narcissist, trying to all the time shift the argument back onto their ground, shift it onto their ground, shift it onto their ground, through distraction, basically.
I already went over those statistics.
Do you know the answer?
No, I don't.
And Piers says, do you know the answer? Again, being the blunt instruments that they are, the upper lesser type B says, no, I don't. And he says, do you know? And he says, no, I don't. That's why Alex was trying to shift the conversation, because he doesn't actually know the answer. So in order to try and remain in control of the conversation, he tries to shift it onto his ground. But of course, Piers, being the much more intelligent upper mid-range narcissist, can see that through all that, of course.
You said hundreds.
It's very low.
You said hundreds.
Yes.
It's actually 35.
Well, the point is you can
against 11.
And of course, being the primitive lesser, he will double down on his point, even though he's been shown to not really know what he's talking about.
1,000. Do you understand the difference between 11,000?
Yeah, England wants...
And talking down. Piers here is talking down to Alex Jones. Do you know the difference? Do you understand? Like a teacher would talk down to a student.
To ban knives now.
Because upper mid-range narcissists, they always believe that they are the teacher, they are the authority figure. Well, all narcissists believe that. It's just how it manifests.
Because tens of thousands are getting stabbed.
Right. But do you understand the difference?
The knife doesn't kill people.
Do you understand?
The gun doesn't kill people.
Again, reiterating, do you understand? Do you understand? Do you get my point? But he's wasting his time because he's talking to a primitive, lesser narcissist. These two might as well argue with the walls around themselves on the set here, because they'll get about as far arguing with the wall as they will arguing with each other, because they're both narcissists. They will never change each other's mind. It's just a giant waste of time.
Yes.
Listen, do you understand you're not going to pull on America's heartstrings?
Again, Piers saying, do you understand the difference between 35 and the much more, much larger number? I think he said it was 11,000 or something.
They know your script, okay? You're not going to get our guns. By the way, you guys always say, we just want to take the semi-autos, okay, and all this other stuff. When semi-autos aren't even, rifles aren't even used, but in a fraction of the crimes, you can pull those numbers up, okay? Hold on.
Let me ask you one question. Which weapon was predominantly used in the Aurora movie theatre shooting?
M4 AR-15.
Again, the right answer from the lesser narcissist.
Variants.
So it was a semi-automatic assault rifle.
When you ask them a direct question, you will get a direct answer from them. Most of the time. We have seen Alex try to shift the conversation back into himself, but that was, again, part of his limbic system, our complex shift, fight, freeze, or flight in operation. When he couldn't answer, he tried to shift the grounds of the argument.
Okay,
but statistically, it's very, very low.
That was it.
And you notice Alex is leaning in. This is very aggressive, getting in Pierce's face. Not as aggressive as the lesser low range or the middle low range narcissist, but still pretty aggressive. I mean, just because he's an upper lesser, he is violent in a sense, but that doesn't mean physical violence. Is the upper lesser type B afraid to throw down? No, but they're not as readily, they're not as hair trigger. They won't do it as quickly as those who are beneath them on the hierarchy.
Do you agree it was the single...
Otherwise, Alex would have already done it by now. Either, like I said, if he was a low lesser or a middle lesser, he would have already stormed off the step by now.
Biggest shooting in the history of...
In my opinion.
America, in terms of people hit by a shooter. Do you know that?
No, I believe that there were others. There's been some other shootings with about over 30.
No, this was the single biggest mass shooting.
Well, listen, you're just going... No, there have been bombings of Wall Street.
Let me ask you a second question.
Are we going to... Listen, why can't the...
Again, shifting the narrative. He's always shifting the narrative. Piers, being the mid-range, is trying to stick to the same single point over and over and over and repeat it in order to try and get Alex under control. Alex, being the lesser, operating from a much more primitive part of the brain, is, trying to always shift it back onto his ground.
Let me
pilots
ask you
have
and they're just butting heads.
second
firearms.
question. Alex,
We trust them to fly the planes.
Alex, you've had a lot to say.
And I like how calm he remains, because the mid-range, especially an upper mid-range, always has to look like they are intellectually superior, which when you're dealing with a lesser narcissist, frankly, isn't that challenging.
No, my
answer
point
the
is the
question.
Second Amendment is sacrosanct,
Do you know?
and you're not getting it.
Do you know which weapon was used in the Oregon shopping mall mass shooting recently?
I understand that people who are mentally ill on all the
Do you know
serotonin
the- do you know-
reuptake.
Again, have to shift the topic. That doesn't mean that Alex Jones is wrong, by the way, in what he's saying. It doesn't mean he doesn't have a point. I'm just explaining the tactics.
Inhibitors.
Just
I'm,
answer.
I'm explaining the thought process. How, not what he's saying, but why he's saying it. Basically, the modus operandi, the part of the brain that's functioning.
Play these shoot 'em up games.
Alex.
Want to go out and do this?
Alex.
And now the facade is beginning to crumble a little bit because, you know, when you're dealing with an upper, lesser type B, even if you are a mid-range narcissist, at some point you're going to get exasperated. Anyone who talks to an upper type B for longer than 3 or 4 minutes is probably going to be pulling their fucking hair out.
Because there's criminals, I don't lose my rights, Piers.
Alex.
Because there's criminals,
Alex.
I don't lose my rights.
Just answer the question.
Yeah, just answer the question. This is the thing with Piers. He's always saying, just answer, because that's how he is trying to assert control.
Yeah.
Do you know what the weapon used was?
Listen, let me ask you a question.
No, answer.
I've got
If the argument remains on an intellectual level, the upper mid-range will win. If the lesser allows the argument to shift to their territory, their ground, they will win. As simple as that, really.
the FBI
Alex.
statistics that, listen,
No.
And that's one of the ways in which President Trump was able to make Jeb Bush look like a complete idiot, was because he was able to get under his skin and shift the argument away from him.
that
Okay.
the so-called
take a
semi-autos
break.
that you talk
Let's take-
about.
But trying to make a upper mid-range narcissist look like an idiot is very tough. It's probably impossible, in fact, unless you really keep at it and really keep at it, because they're very good at maintaining the facade.
Take a break. When we come back,
Again,
I mean, the facade of being intellectual and, you know, knowing what they're talking about.
you're not going to get our guns.
When we come back, try and answer my question.
Again, that just sums it up. From the upper mid-range, try and answer my question, because that's what he's been trying to get Alex to do this whole time, is answer his questions. But Alex keeps shifting and shifting and shifting onto his ground, so they cancel each other out. So at the end of the day, Piers has looked like more rational, more calm, more intelligent, more intellectual, because he's an upper mid-range narcissist.
Yeah, all you're going to do is
You can see the frustration on his face. You can't hide that.
going to get our
Try-
guns.
And by the way, there wasn't a third segment after this, if I remember right. I mean, we're going back at, 7 or 8 years here. At least that, if not more. But, you know, Alex was done after this segment because in order to reassert control, after realizing he couldn't control Alex, he just said, just leave. He realized it was a lost cause, I think.
When we come back, try and answer my question.
Yeah, all you're going to do is sit there and play little factoid questions. Overall crime has gone
it's
up over
about
20%.
So, there you go. Hope you enjoyed this analysis, and thanks for watching.